Today, we're diving into a genuinely fascinating reality: how modern archaeology and cutting-edge technology are proving that a lot of the history we learned in school is, well, kind of an illusion. We tend to think of the past as this settled, unchanging storyline, but as we're about to explore, science is out there actively rewriting that story every single day.
It's so easy to just trust the history we see beautifully displayed in museum glass cases or in blockbuster movies. But what if your favorite history book is essentially a work of fiction? Let's dive right into this and see how a series of shocking recent discoveries basically pulled the rug out from under us, forcing historians to fundamentally rethink the entire human timeline.
Section 1. Rethinking Early Human History. Let's kick things off by completely blowing up that classic image of the grunting, club-wielding caveman. So for generations, we just assumed early humans lived entirely in dark, damp caves because, hey, that's where we found all their paintings and tools. But here's the catch. It all comes down to survivorship bias. It's a simple mistake where we only look at the evidence that actually survived the test of time. In reality, ancient humans were out there building open-air wooden huts and animal skin tents. But out in the wind and rain, all those materials just completely rotted away. Meanwhile, the stone tools and bones they left behind during brief visits to caves, maybe to escape a bad storm or perform a ritual, were perfectly preserved. It basically tricked us into thinking they lived in those caves full-time. And it wasn't just where they lived, it's what they were actually capable of building. Take Göbekli Tepe, a site hidden deep in the hills of Turkey. When researchers started digging, they found enormous, incredibly heavy stone pillars arranged in these huge circles, completely covered in detailed carvings of lions, scorpions, and foxes. The absolute shocker here, it was built roughly 12,000 years ago by hunter-gatherers. This completely shattered the long-held textbook belief that humans had to invent farming and settle down before they could even think about building massive, complex stone temples. And get this, their medicine was mind-blowing too. We used to think a serious head injury in the Stone Age was just an automatic death sentence, but scientists digging up ancient skulls found smooth, carefully cut artificial holes in them. It was an ancient form of brain surgery called trepanation, meant to relieve pressure inside the head. When doctors looked at the bone growth around those holes, they realized these patients didn't just survive the procedure, which is crazy enough on its own, they actually thrived. They had a shocking 70 to 90% survival rate. That is literally staggering for an era where your only surgical tools were made of rock and bone. Section 2. Pop Culture Warriors Debunked. Now that we've completely rewritten the brilliance of the Stone Age, let's fast forward and see how history totally ruins our favorite action movies. It is honestly wild when you look at the sheer scale of the myths we've just accepted as fact. Take the Spartans, for example. They were romanticized by their rivals as these unbeatable super soldiers who always fought to the death. But historically, they lost plenty of battles, surrendered to their enemies, and actually lived in constant, terrifying fear of rebellions from their enslaved workers, the Helots. Then you have the bloodthirsty Vikings, famous for drinking from the hollowed-out skulls of their enemies. Okay, that myth was literally just a 1600s European translator completely misunderstanding an ancient Norse poetic riddle. The poem mentioned the curved branches of skulls, which was just a clever word puzzle for a totally normal, everyday cow horn.
And what about ninjas? That famous, tight, all-black suit from head to toe is entirely made up. I mean, think about it. Wearing solid black at night actually makes you stand out unnaturally against the moonlight. That iconic look was actually invented centuries later by Japanese kabuki theater stagehands, who wore black so the audience would just ignore them. Real historical spies, the shinobi, spent most of their time blending in during the day as street merchants or traveling monks. And when they did sneak around at night, they wore ash gray, brown, or a dark blue plant dye specifically because it repelled bugs. Way more practical, right?
Moving on to Section 3, the real Wild West. Because, spoiler alert, Hollywood completely lied to us about the American frontier too. We've all been led to believe that the Wild West was this crazy, lawless free-for-all, where everyone walked around with a weapon on their hip. High-noon shootouts in the street, right? Well, historical court records from famous frontier towns like Tombstone reveal they actually had incredibly strict gun control. It was definitely not a free-for-all. Visitors were legally required to immediately hand their guns over to the sheriff or check them safely at their hotel the second they arrived in town. If you didn't, you were arrested and heavily fined. Simple as that. And the people living there? Television shows practically exclusively show white cowboys, but the real West was incredibly diverse. When historians really dug into official census documents and personal diaries from the 1800s, they proved that up to 1 in 4 cowboys was actually a black man seeking freedom and paid work,
On top of that, the essential skills of the cowboy, things like roping and herding, were entirely invented by Mexican riders called vaqueros. Add in thousands of Native American cowboys, plus Asian immigrants building the vital railroads, and the reality of the frontier was actually a vibrant multicultural workforce.
All right. Section 4. Empires and Lost Worlds. This is where simple things like weather and decay got mistakenly blown way out of proportion into explosive cataclysms. Take the Great Sphinx in Egypt. The really popular legend blames the French general Napoleon Bonaparte, claiming his soldiers blasted the Sphinx's nose right off with a cannonball for target practice. Well, Napoleon is completely innocent here. A Danish explorer visited Egypt in the 1730s, which is over 60 years before Napoleon even arrived, and drew a highly detailed picture showing the nose was already gone. Documents from the 1400s actually prove it was purposely smashed by a religious man back in the year 1378. He was apparently angry that local farmers were leaving gifts for the stone face to help their crops grow.
And then there's the Library of Alexandria. We've all heard the tragedy of it burning down in one massive apocalyptic fire that set human progress back centuries. Yeah, mostly a myth. While it did suffer some minor fires over the years, the real enemy of the library wasn't flames, it was budget cuts. As new empires took over the city, the rulers just simply stopped paying the scientists and stopped fixing the roof. The fragile scrolls naturally rotted away from the damp weather over hundreds of years, and the surviving texts were slowly relocated to other places. There was no single dramatic fire.
Even the Earth itself plays tricks on us. Today, we know the Sahara as this massive barren wasteland, but radar satellites peering deep beneath the sand, alongside ancient rock paintings of people swimming, revealed something absolutely astonishing. Thanks to a natural wobble in the Earth's axis that happens every 20,000 years, global weather patterns completely shifted. Because of that wobble, just 10,000 years ago, massive rainstorms pounded North Africa, transforming the Sahara into a lush, green landscape packed with huge rivers, lakes, and even hippos.
On the flip side, sometimes things we are absolutely certain are pure fantasy turn out to be real. The legendary city of Troy, famous for the giant wooden horse from the Trojan War, was considered 100% poetic fiction. That is, until the 1870s, when an explorer named Heinrich Schliemann decided to use Homer's ancient poems as a literal treasure map. He dug into a dusty hill in modern-day Turkey and, to the absolute shock of the world, found the thick stone walls of a massive ancient settlement, complete with crushed weapons and burned towers matching the exact timeline of the war.
Which brings us to our final section, Science Rewriting the Past. Let's look at how modern science, using computers, satellites, and DNA, is actively rewriting our understanding of history right now, today. For the longest time, we thought Native Americans lived in total isolation from the rest of the globe until Christopher Columbus showed up in 1492. But modern researchers noticed something weird. Polynesians, living way out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, grew the sweet potato, which is a plant native only to South America. By testing modern populations, scientists actually found matching Native American DNA in Polynesians. This proved that brilliant Polynesian sailors navigated thousands of miles of open ocean to reach South America around the year 1200. They traded, shared cultures, and brought the sweet potato back home, centuries before Columbus even set sail.
And science isn't just giving human history an update, we're literally repainting the prehistoric world. Back in the 1990s, scientists examining fine volcanic ash in China realized that those smooth, scaly, green reptiles we see in pop culture movies are entirely wrong. That superfine volcanic ash preserved delicate details that normal dirt just destroys. The fossils clearly showed fuzzy outlines all around the bodies. Careful testing proved these were ancient feathers. We now know for sure that many dinosaurs, including the direct ancestors of the fearsome T-Rex, were actually covered in feathers.
Finally, researchers recently used modern computer programming to solve one of the darkest mysteries of the Middle Ages, the Black Death. Everyone knows rats spread the plague, right? Well, not exactly. When computers modeled the wildly fast spread of the disease across Europe, the math just didn't add up. Rats simply do not travel fast enough or far enough from their homes to cause that kind of rapid wave. The computer results were super clear. The real culprits spreading the plague directly from person to person were just everyday human fleas and body lice hitching a ride on the travelers themselves. So, from ancient brain surgery and feathered dinosaurs to law-abiding cowboys and bug-repelling ninjas, this explainer really highlights one thing. History isn't just a static list of memorized facts. It's this continuous, vibrant journey of discovery. Every time we invent a new tool, we correct our survivorship bias and tear down the myths we've built up over the centuries. The illusion of certainty really is history's greatest trick.
Which leaves us with one absolutely fascinating question to ponder as we wrap up today. If we were completely wrong about almost everything we just covered in this explainer, often due to simple things like rotting wood or mistranslated poems, what are historians going to get completely wrong about us 1,000 years from now? Think about what will survive from our time and what won't, and how that's going to shape their reality of our present.